close to this spot. Anyway, we've got a skeleton in a shallow grave. Usually not a good case for death by natural causes. Usually not. Are we thinking serial killer? Maybe. I wasn't working here when the other two bodies were found, and the detective that did work them is now in another state. So you rushed right over. Didn't have anything better to do, huh? She teased him, and he smiled back. Nah. They both knew he had an overflowing desk full of cases he was working on. As Jamie slipped on a pair of gloves, then tugged the sleeves back down to the edge of her palms, Dakota couldn't help notice the brief flash of scars around her wrists. She always wore long sleeves, no matter the weather. But she'd never told him why. And he'd never told her he'd fallen in love with her practically from the moment they'd met, a little less than 2 years ago, when he'd been helping her sister and Connor with the case of missing and murdered teenagers. Since then, he'd been trying to win this lady's heart. Thus far, he'd failed miserably and didn't have a clue what he was doing wrong. All right, she turned toward the grave. Let's see what we've got. Jamie ignored the thumping of her heart that Dakota's presence always seemed to incite and turned her attention to her job. His dark curly hair, keen blue eyes, Stetson, cowboy boots, and Texas drawl combined to make him one attractive man. The problem was, she didn't know what to do with her reaction to him, so she pretended it wasn't there. They were working in an open field, property that belonged to the mortuary but hadn't been used as graves yet. Part of the excavation team Jamie worked with on a regular basis had already dug down around the skeleton so that they could stand upright in the grave next to the bones that now lay on a dirt platform. Normally, they would place the bones on a gurney and transport it to the morgue. However, in this case, the body hadn't been lying down when it had been buried. It had been dropped into a hole sitting up. The bones rested on top of each other, looking like one big lump, and Jamie could see what others couldn't. Her crew knew the bones were not to be disturbed until she had a chance to see them exactly as they were found, and looking down into the grave, she could see the spine lying face down. The skull lay just in front of the spine like it had been dropped off the end. All of this lay on top of what had probably once been thighs. The ribs were perfectly proportioned, still attached to the spine by some desiccated tissue. The right arm, which included the humerus, radius, and ulna, lay across the back of the spine. The left arm was missing, the bones that the bobcat had clipped and pulled out of the grave, to the horror of the workers. It was amazing the machine hadn't disturbed the rest of the skeleton, or completely destroyed it. Jamie felt someone approaching and stepped to the opposite side of the grave. She liked her space. She shot a smile at the curly-headed crime scene photographer who stood at the edge. "Hey, Chase, have you gotten all the pictures?" A shock of red hair covered his left eye as he nodded. "I got them." "Great. Now I guess it's my turn." Looking down into the hole was one thing. Getting into it was another. She started her anxiety-calming exercises, abdominal breaths, not chest breathing. 1, 2, 3. Okay. It had been a long time since the last panic attack, and she wasn't about to give in now. Time to see what she was made of. Jamie dropped down into the grave. She stood there for a number of seconds, smelling the dampness of the earth, feeling the darkness surround her. She remembered the pain, the mind-numbing fear. Shut it out. Let it go. It doesn't control you anymore. You control it. She shuddered, then focused on the one thing that would take her mind off her fear. The bones. 2 hours later, she had her documentation on paper, and with her help, the team brought up what looked to be an entire skeleton jigsaw puzzle. As Jamie supervised the transfer of the bones to various boxes, the rest of the